Oh, and we are live. You can pretend, if you were tuned in at 10 o'clock for our show, you can pretend that we just got the time zones wrong or that you got the time zones wrong. Maybe you don't know how to tell time. Maybe that's the real problem of why we are an hour late, almost exactly. And
hey, at least I was exact.
Yeah, that's right. You were precise. I'm Zane Simon, joined by Connor Rebish, much to his shame.
Back from the dead.
We are here to do the MMA Vivisection of UFC Houston, Bermudez versus Korean Zombie, a fight card I am more excited about than last week's fight card. I gotta say,
which is strange. I was wondering this as I was doing my Sherdog preview for this card. I was thinking, will Zane be more excited for this than the last one? Because I think the last one turned out to be a pretty fun card. And this one I think has fewer name value matchups on the undercard than that one did.
Well, part of why, I feel like the last one really ended up exceeding, the main card ended up really exceeding my expectations. The Alvi Marquardt, Aljamain Sterling, or Rafael Asunciao, that was more like kind of what I was expecting, where things really started to take a real slowdown. But Arlovsky fought dumb and got knocked out, so that was nice. Unless you're an Arlovsky fan.
Or Arlovsky himself.
Yeah. Masvidal absolutely dialed up Donald Cerrone, which meant that a fight that I thought would be kind of a slow, simmering points battle ended up being a complete barn burner.
We both thought it would be kind of a chess match, and it was not. I mean, it was a smartly fought fight, but
yeah. But still, not any kind of relaxed pace that I was expecting it to just be Don Cerrone outworking George Masvidal. And then in the main event, I mean, Shevchenko's nothing. She's not a finisher, so I was certainly not expecting. I don't think anyone was expecting her to submit Juliana Pena. So it exceeded my expectations of fun fights. Now, when I look at this, I can't help but be excited by Korean Zombie this week. I really like this Grasso Herrig fight. I think that's exactly the right fight for Alexa Grasso right now. And then Jessica Andrade versus Angela Hill, it makes me really happy too. So there are already several fights on this main card that I'm like, I think these are going to be really fun, cool fights. So
maybe it's also, is it the secret hipster in you that lies in all of us that you're like, it's like all kind of fan favorites. You know what I mean? Like it's all like hardcore fan favorites, like Korean Zombie. No one gives a shit. Like 3 million people will tune in to watch the woman who beat Holly Holm. But no one cares about Korean Zombie except for us. But we are so happy that he's back. It's like a secret little thing for us.
Maybe, except the ratings on that last week's card tanked. So
did they? I thought they did really well.
No, it got the lowest card of any UFC Fox card in January.
I heard 3 million.
2. Unless it made a huge jump the next day.
I could be wrong. I saw on Reddit. It was just a headline, so I just read the headline, so that's my mistake, perhaps. But I saw 3.03 million was the peak, which I thought was a pretty good number.
Hanging Pulse 2.02 million viewers. Maybe it peaked higher. Let me even peak would be peaks at 3 million.
I mean, that's a pretty good peak, right? That's not bad.
I mean, it got beat out by a random NBA game, and let's see.
Like this.
So the last one, Paige Van Zandt, Michelle Watterson peaked at 4.8. That's
yeah.
And Shevchenko's win over Holly Holm peaked at 4.7. So the ratings were really still not.
There are surely Fox cards that have done lower. I'm sure like
there are. Oh yeah.
Rashad Davis probably did like 1.5 or something like that.
Maybe it's like it may be third lowest among Fox shows, or if not, it's certainly not it's certainly trending towards the low end. It's
Was it
not the lowest.
Lower than the last one, which was like a complete garbage, hot trash fire card.
Well, yeah, the Watterson. I just said the Watterson.
Not that one. The one before that.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not going to get too far into it. But my point is that last card didn't do all that well. I don't know that this is going to do. Obviously can't do better because it's not on Fox. It's on FS1. But this captures much closer to my heart because I mean, there are some bad fights on this. There's some fights that I did not expect to be good or competitive. There's some very uncompetitive fights on this. But there's some really fun barn burner fights that, a lot more of this card looks like Caceres versus Knight to me, which ended up being amazing.
I apologize, by the way, for this cat that keeps screaming in the background and wandering around on my desk. I'm trying my best to get rid of her, but
yeah, no, livens the place up. All right. On that note,
I'm with you. I think it's a good card. Yes, let's move on.
we're pushing ahead. Yes. Too much time already spent, and the first bout, light heavyweight bout, Daniel Jolly, Khalil Rountree. Talk me through it, Connor.
Okay. She's literally climbing all over my shoulders. Daniel Jolly, Khalil Rountree. Not one of the greatest fights on the card, let's be honest. Belongs on the Fight Pass prelims. Khalil Rountree is something to maybe get excited about, but he's kind of lost some of his luster as a prospect because he has not developed. At least as far as I can tell, he has not made any dramatic changes, which are the kind of changes you really want to see this early in a fighter's career. Although, how young is Khalil Rountree?
He's not that young. His career is young.
His career is young, but I think he's around 30. I don't know if he's quite that fresh.
He's 26. So actually he's not old.
So he should be probably making an athlete of his caliber, hopefully, to be considered a real prospect, should be making some pretty large leaps.
Yeah, I think the big thing for him is that he had zero athletic background when he started his MMA career at all.
It's the first thing he's learned, which is crazy because look at the way he's built. Yeah. And how hard he hits and how fast he moves. How has he never done any sport? How is that possible?
He used to be a fat guy. I think he got in shape through MMA and has translated it into a pro career.
Well, good for Khalil Rountree. And he definitely has potential. He's young. He has time. He's super powerful and dangerous. But he kind of does the same thing in every fight, which is stalk you, throw big power, throw big kicks, start to get tired, and avoid the ground at all costs, which against a really good grappler is not usually that distinct a possibility because he's got a great sprawl, but it's pretty much a single layer of takedown defense. Once you get into the clinch, it becomes kind of clear that he doesn't really know how to wrestle. Not as well as most of his opponents who want to take him down do. Not as well as Tyson Pedro did, for that matter. Fortunately for him, Daniel Jolly is not a great wrestler. He will probably want to take Rountree down in this bout, but he is not a phenomenal wrestler. And so he will have to strike with Rountree for at least the first round. That is when Khalil is extremely dangerous. So I'm going to go with Khalil Rountree by first round TKO, and that's it.
Yeah, I think Khalil Rountree is improving very slowly, but it's the improvements of somebody who really has to make up space everywhere. Like, he's really, it's like, well, you got to learn how to box, you got to learn how to kickbox, you got to learn how to wrestle, you got to learn how to grapple, and you're trying to figure all these things out that are going to take a long time. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing here is Jolly likes to strike and has a very traditional martial arts background, and that means he throws a lot of awkward stuff without a lot of power behind it. It's kind of like Stephen Thompson without the footwork and cagecraft.
Yeah, without the things that make Stephen Thompson good.
Yeah, and power. And I think that's just a bad recipe against Rountree, who at the very least is patient and hits hard. The big problem for Rountree has tended to be that when he hits somebody hard, then he adrenaline dumps and gets like really over aggressive. And I think that's why he gets so tired, is that he's only going from like really slow pace to throw everything at this person and try to knock them out right now.
which makes this bout a little bit of a double-edged sword for him as a developing prospect because, I mean, Misha Serkinov was hurting Daniel Jolly in their fight, and Khalil almost certainly hits a lot harder than Misha Serkinov.
Yep.
So he probably will be able to find that first-round KO, but then does that mean he doesn't get any more time in the cage in which to try out all the new skills that he should hopefully be working on?
Yeah. We'll see. Either way, I'm picking Khalil. Odds on this opened for him at -190, now -162. Jolly opened at +150, now down to +136. I don't know that there's any bets to be, let's see, under 1.5 rounds at -135 even. I don't think there's any bets to be made on that. Not unless it gets really like Khalil Rountree goes to even, but even then it should be. Like, these are bottom barrel light heavyweights who could knock each other out and who have major holes in their game. You don't really want to try and decide anything on that.
The total's not bad. Under
total?
under 1.5 rounds is -135, -129 on one card. It's not terrible.
Yeah.
Might go for that.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that way, just in case Daniel Jolly does well, you still account for him doing that, and otherwise you get the most likely result, which is Rountree with a quick knockout as usual.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to Alex Morono versus Niko Price, I believe, and this it's going to be an ugly fight, I would say. I mean, mostly because almost any Alex Morono fight is going to be an ugly fight because he is tough and relentless and not a very technical fighter.
He's not very good and yet somehow very effective.
Yeah.
He's an interesting dude.
I am going to probably pick him to beat Niko Price. Price is his stand-up doesn't impress me at all. I think he tends to wait too long on things and try and be a little craftier than he is technical. And I think that that's going to give Morono a lot of chances to just march him down. Now, Price may be the better grappler, maybe, but it's not like he just absolutely wrecked Brandon Thatch's world, or that I take a lot from submitting Brandon Thatch, frankly. Brandon Thatch keeps making the same mistakes on the ground over and over again. So I kind of feel like I'm going to pick Morono to survive on the ground and be able to work there reasonably well if the fight goes there, and otherwise out pressure Price.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, right? Alex Morono is consistently not the better wrestler.
Yeah.
Like not a very effective takedown artist, not necessarily the better grappler, and not the cleaner striker, but he knows how to make his game work. You know, he swings wild, he comes forward, he keeps coming, and he actually selects his shots fairly well, even if they're very obvious and wide. We saw in that James Mutasari fight that if we're talking about what is the barrier for an unathletic fighter versus an extremely athletic fighter, I mean, that was a good sign that there's something about Alex Morono that we're not giving him enough credit for.
Yeah.
That he clearly beat James Mutasari.
He adjusted really well to Mutasari's kicking game as the fight went on.
Yeah, so it's hard to count him out, but as somebody who analyzes technique, I don't really know precisely what it is that gets him these wins. I can't really put my finger on why he's so effective. So maybe we'll get the chance to understand that more here. I am going to go with Niko Price very tentatively. You're right. He tries to be a little too cute on the feet sometimes. And if Morono just kind of comes after him wailing, it might cause an effect. I think Price thinks he's a better striker than he really is. Yeah. But he is a pretty solid wrestler and does have a very good ground game. Granted, choking out Brandon Thatch is not phenomenal, but Niko Price knows what he's doing on the ground. So too does Alex Morono. But at the very least, if Price is the one scoring the takedowns and setting up the transitions, which I think he will, he's pretty much the first guy Morono's fought in the UFC who has a good takedown game, then he can change the pace of the fight and probably take some of the momentum out of that crazy Morono striking. But If Alex Morono wins, I will not be shocked one bit.
Yeah, this fight has like sloppy split decision written all over it to me.
Mm-hmm.
I can see.
Yeah. Or like majority draw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Odds on that fight, price opened at -150, is now -127. Morono opened at +110, is now +103. Those odds are dropping closer and closer to even, which I think is just about right, as they should be. And I wouldn't make any bets on this. I mean, the only maybe on over one, well, even that's -170 for over 1.5 rounds, but there's just nothing about like Morono's he's wild enough that he can easily get caught and stuff. And Price, I don't find Price's game to be aggressive enough or technical enough to make me trust that he's gonna really push the pace on Morono.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's fair.
I wouldn't touch that fight. That brings us to a women's strawweight bout: Tecia Torres versus Bec Rawlings.
The first of many great women's strawweight bouts on this card. Mm-hmm. Tecia Torres, I think that Tecia Torres, I'm not sure the UFC knows what to do with her, because she's basically the Rafael Sunsao of the women's strawweight division. She's really good, and yet with each win, she seems to get further from a title shot, because she's not. Most people don't find her to be that fun to watch, but she's very effective, a very smart fighter, and extremely well-rounded. She can basically take a fight anywhere and win a fight anywhere against almost anyone in the division. And I really like Rose Namajunas. I picked her in that fight, but I did kind of think Tecia Torres deserved the win. Yeah. And that was when Namajunas was right in the midst of a tear, and Torres looked really good, man. She approached a difficult matchup with a huge reach advantage, and she did it very intelligently. So makes this kind of an easy pick for me, because people who've listened to this show before, watched this show before, know I don't have the highest opinion of what Bec Rawlings does in the cage. She is getting better. She seems to be a good fit with Eric Del Fierro, or rather Eric Del Fierro is a good fit for her. Mm-hmm. She has improved her boxing, and there's no doubt, even though I think she definitely lost to Seo Hee Ham, she was landing some good shots on Seo Hee Ham. She was landing good right hands, good counters, and she did that in her fight with Paige Van Zandt as well. She won the first round in that with her striking. So she's cleaning it up. She's becoming more technical. That's great. However, judging by the last time she went to the third round in that Ham fight, she still gets tired. If she's in a scramble, she still gets over aggressive, and she's just not particularly fast or surprising with her combinations. Everything feels kind of rote because she feels kind of slow, and I think that'll be particularly pronounced against a fighter like Torres, who's very light in her feet, very quick, changes between strikes and takedowns really easily. So Rawlings may have a surprisingly good first round, back and forth. Ticia's not amazing in the pocket, so if Rawlings can get that range, she has a chance. But as soon as Rawlings starts to slow down and Torres gets her game going, I think it'll become a pretty one-sided fight. And I actually think Tecia, judging by the late flurries she's been putting on her opponents lately and the aggression she's been trying to bring out once she knows she has them beat, I think she might get a late TKO or submission. It's possible. So yeah. Tecia Torres all the way.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. I think the big thing for Rawlings has always, unfortunately, been that she's just not very athletic. And it used to be that she wasn't athletic and she wasn't in that great a shape. And so she, her style was just kind of all about how aggressive she could be for how long. But lately it's more, she's obviously gotten in better shape. She's obviously cleaned up her technique a lot. But she's still not very athletic. So by the time the third round comes of pushing a fast pace and throwing a lot, if you're not a great athlete, like, you're just going to be tired. There's not really any way around that. And the holes are too big. Like, she can be easy, she can be decisively better than Paige Van Zandt for a round and still get knocked out by some random flying head kick thing that just is not something she can do or work with. And Torres has too much of that. Torres is a great athlete and, has always been one of the superb athletes in women's MMA for as long as she's been there. She, her like you say, I think there's a good argument that she beat Rose Namajunas, and that would otherwise leave her undefeated for her pro career, and her only losses being her exhibition losses to Esparza and Marcos. And yeah, it's just her boxing has cleaned up a lot. That was one of the big things I saw in the Rose Namajunas fight. She is getting better in the pocket at throwing combinations.
That was especially clear in the Jocelyn Jones-Lieberger fight, in which once she knew she had Jocelyn's number, she tuned her up in the pocket with that right hand.
Yep. And I don't understand quite a lot of the hate that Torres gets. I mean, she's turned in like 1 or 2 wrestling heavy performances in her whole career where she was just like, I'm just going to get takedowns and work some top position on these people because I can. But otherwise, she's always been like right in there throwing all sorts of weird, fun Taekwondo boxing combos.
Yeah, I think that you're probably a nerd when you enjoy Tecia Torres more than Bec Rawlings. But I agree. I don't think there's a good reason not to like Tecia. She looks a little methodical sometimes. Maybe she feels too calculated, but she's very good.
Yeah. So she beat Rawlings on the show. Rawlings has improved, but not so much that I don't think that great athletes with well-rounded games still beat her every time.
Mm-hmm.
Torres is the favorite in that fight, opening at -280, now -269. Rawlings opening at +200, now at +219. I think you could probably stretch those odds a little bit further on Torres and still be fair.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Maybe under 2.5 rounds at +265 is worth taking a chance on, because that you're basically betting that Torres gets a finish.
Yeah, unfortunately, I got lucky. I bet on Torres a little while ago when the odds were starting to narrow, and now they've gone right back to where they started.
There's no reason those odds should be narrow. This is a fight. Not only is Torres the better athlete and the more skilled fighter in every aspect, but she's also won this fight before.
Yeah, true. I mean, what reason is there really to pick against her? Maybe even just the straight odds, but I'm not sure. Yeah. I think maybe it's not a great fight for betting.
Probably not. Like I say, if you think that Torres could finish Rawlings, then there's maybe a small bet there. But
yeah, but even then, Tecia Torres is not a consistent finisher, so
no,
I wouldn't bet on it.
That brings us to Ricardo Ramos versus Michinori Tanaka. And I am super excited about this fight.
Me too.
Because it will undoubtedly be bananas.
Yeah. Is it you?
It's me. So I am picking Ricardo Ramos to score an upset here. And the biggest reason I'm doing that is that Ramos knows exactly what he wants to do in the fight. He's over aggressive as a grappler. He's aggressive to a fault. He's one of those fighters that he fights like he does not believe that anyone could possibly stop him or be better than him.
Yeah.
And he's been right about that a lot, but he also got caught in a sub. He can be wrong about that. Somebody will stuff his takedowns and knock him out at some point because he is reckless. But Tanaka also has some of that and has less idea of what it is he wants to do in a fight. Tanaka has a terrible habit of, he's a better striker than Ramos. He's a better wrestler, probably. But he will just, like we saw in his fight against Ronnie Yaya, he could not, for the life of himself, stop from engaging Yaya inside and letting Yaya get takedowns over and over again and letting Yaya reverse positions and just staying in these prolonged scrambles that he wasn't winning.
He's an alpha male fighter, you know?
Yeah. And I think that Ramos, that will give him the fight he wants, the fight that he's prepared to excel in. And Tanaka could beat him. Tanaka's a great athlete and, like I say, probably the better wrestler and almost certainly the better boxer and striker. but I just think that he's not a better athlete, and he will give Ramos too much of the fight he wants. So I'm going to pick Ricardo Ramos, but I expect it to be a fantastic, action-packed grappling scramble fest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I also like Ricardo Ramos in this fight. I think he's not a dissimilar fighter from Joe Soto, which is a fight that Michinori Tanaka most felt that Michinori lost. It was at least a very close fight in which he was constantly being put in bad positions, had to defend a lot of submissions.
He's a better athlete than Joe Soto.
Yeah, right. So he's kind of Joe Soto, but more dangerous.
Yeah. More
durable and more athletic. So that's saying a lot for Ricardo Ramos. Now, yes, he's a little too crazy aggressive. The good news, he may have gotten a little of that out of the way because he did have his prospect loss already.
Yep.
Prior to the UFC, he was submitted in about a minute recently, and then came back and looked good. So he's gotten over that hump. Maybe it means he'll be a little more measured or will deal better with opponents who match his aggression going forward. Fortunately for him, Michinori Tanaka is not a super aggressive fighter. He's basically a Japanese Uriah Faber. He likes to kind of pick his shots, wait and counter from the outside, switch those up with takedowns, likes to scramble. But unfortunately, the thing too with Michinori Tanaka is he gets tired, and I don't think he'll ever solve this problem because he is young, but he's been fighting for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
He's been fighting for, I think, 6 years. So at some point, you'd like to see a guy fix his stamina issues if they are going to be fixed. And Tanaka's not a guy who fights at a crazy pace. It's not like he has a ton of great excuses for why he gets tired so easily. And Ricardo Ramos does not have that problem. Now, the one thing that worries me here is that Tanaka will probably be the better wrestler, and he will probably be able to control the whereabouts of the fight. So he may be able to choose to put Ramos down if Ramos is out striking him, which Ramos is not a bad striker. He's pretty good. Or he may be able to keep the fight from going to the ground if he has an advantage on the feet. So that he does have more options in that way. But I think Ramos is aggressive enough and crafty enough in pretty much every phase to find some opportunity. And I don't really think Tanaka will avoid taking him to the ground. And
well, Tanaka's just he doesn't control anything.
Yeah.
Even when he's doing well, he never has control of his success.
Right. And Ramos is one of those guys too that, speaking of control, like when he's on his back, he doesn't always stay there that long. He's constantly sweeping, scrambling, and throwing up submissions. So I like Ricardo Ramos by decision. Possibly by submission.
Ramos opens as the underdog at plus 170, now down to plus 158. Tanaka opening at minus 230, now down to minus 189.
We did forget to mention that this is a looking for a fight discovery, Ricardo Ramos, so he'll probably lose.
But it's a guy that everybody knew was a top prospect and just ended up being on a Dana White looking for a fight. Like, he was on his way to the UFC before he lost by submission in that recent fight. So that was that loss probably was the fight that would have gotten him into the UFC had he won it. So it's not exactly like, and then Dana White comes out and finds some 2-0 kid to put all his acorns in.
Yeah.
That sounded really weird, but anyway.
Gonna put all my acorns in this kid. All right, let's move on before the FBI detects this through Google voice recognition.
Yeah, no kidding.
And arrives at your door.
But I think Ramos is worth an underdog bet at those odds.
Ramos is definitely. I think so.
At plus 170, plus 175, or plus 150, I think that you should consider a small bet on him. Tanaka is not consistent at all as a favorite. Like, this is a dude who went out and lost to Ronnie Yaya and Kyung Ho Kang, and had trouble with took Joe Soto and Roland Delorme to close decisions. So
yeah, it's tough, man. I want to see Tanaka put it together. He's likable. He's athletic. He's got a lot of promise, but he's not delivered, and he's had a good amount of time in which to do so. So
yeah, And that brings us to Chaz Skelly versus Chris Gruetzemacher.
This is probably the first middleweight fight in featherweight history. It must be. Chris Gruetzemacher is a middleweight for sure, even though he fights at featherweight.
He is a middleweight, I know.
They were constantly saying how he's a training partner of Ben Henderson, but he does not remind me of that particular MMA lab fighter. He reminds me of Court McGee, early Court McGee, in that he takes shots and he just doesn't give a damn. He keeps coming forward and throwing volume. Offensively, he's pretty good. You know, like he hits harder than it looks like he does. He targets the body and the legs and the head all very well. He mixes up his shots nicely. He fights behind a jab. He slips and counters sometimes, you know, like it has to be a one move. He only slips and counters. He never just slips to defend his chin, but the slip and counter uppercut that he used in his fights against what was the gentleman who fought last? Yeah, Lovares, yeah. That was good. So Gruetzemacher, tough dude, hard to hurt, hard to put away, and just keeps coming. But that's kind of all he does is like march forward and try to beat people up and get beaten up if he can't stop it. And Chaz Skelly is not an amazing striker, but he does have good timing and good power. He's a better striker than it seems like he should be. Even when you know he's knocked people out, you know he's hurt people, you go in there and fight him and you must think, this dude can't hit me. Like he's swinging, his posture's all weird, his arms they're too long, like they look so long that they're unwieldy. I can't imagine him being a good boxer, but he's not, but he's still effective. He's a featherweight
James Vick is what he is.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah. Including, you know, the durability and of course the crafty, opportunistic submission grappling. I will say, I think his grappling is better put together than James Vick's. Yeah. It's he's got a very complete ground game where everything Chaz Skelly does has multiple avenues he can follow to lead to something else. And yeah, that's probably a problem for Chris Gruetzemacher. If Chaz Skelly wasn't a good takedown artist, then Gruetzemacher would probably have a chance here. If Chaz Skelly wasn't the type of submission grappler who doesn't need a takedown to work his ground game, who couldn't wrap up a leg from a roll or something like that, then Gruetzemacher would have a really good shot here. But unfortunately, Chaz Skelly is that type of grappler. He's got a good takedown game. He's a strong wrestler. He's a great scrambler. So whether he's on bottom or top, he'll probably end up in a good position. So I just think Chaz Skelly has too many avenues to victory here. And I think Gruetzemacher is a little too hittable and a little too predictable for someone like Chaz. So I'm going with Skelly. Let's see. Let me check what I picked on my Sherdog preview. For consistency's sake, Skelly by second round submission.
Yeah. Gruetzemacher to me seems like the kind of dude, like watching tape on him, that he's probably like a really great person to have in the gym and maybe like a really great coach potentially down the line.
Sure.
But
yeah.
Not going to have a long and fruitful UFC career.
He's awesome. I mean, I love the guy. You know already. You could just look at him and know Conor Rebush is a fan of this dude. He's exactly the type of like artless, gritty machine that I love to watch.
Well, I think like I get the feeling that he's somebody who like really takes a lot of time and puts a lot of patience in learning to be technical and fight technical, and yet he's just not a very good athlete at all. And that is always going to be a major stopping point of like, you're not fast and you're not gonna, you know, you're not dynamic in any way. He's the exact opposite of dynamic. And at some point, that's just kind of a huge hill to climb, especially in divisions like featherweight. It's like, it's one thing if you're Dan Kelly at 185.
Right. Gruetzemacher would be an amazing middleweight, dude. He would be very successful. No joke. He's like Dan Kelly's striking game, which sounds horrible, but up another notch. Like, you're right. He is the opposite of dynamic in kind of the best way you can be the opposite of dynamic. He's very consistent with how he approaches fights.
And I just think that means though that Chaz Skelly's going to kind of style on him. It's probably going to just take him down and submit him, outwork him. If Skelly cannot get if Gruetzemacher shows a good ability to just shut down the grappling and takedown game of Skelly, this fight could get really interesting because Skelly's striking is still super ugly. But Skelly is absolutely relentless in his pursuit of his wrestling and grappling games. So I don't even think that would turn the tide that much. I think he would just pin Gruetzemacher up against the cage and rough him up and work for takedowns over and over there. So I got Skelly, probably like you say, by second round submission. It seems like a complete mismatch that I feel a little bad for Gruetzemacher for getting put in that, because there are a lot of other featherweights in that division that don't have the experience that Skelly has in it.
He'll be back. Fortunately, it's one loss. I guess they're trying to get Skelly back on track. I'm not really sure why, but it'll be one loss. And Gruetzemacher certainly proved in his last fight, for anyone who saw it, that he will always deliver action if given the opportunity. So
yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
Nice if like a fight between Gruetzemacher and Enrique Barzola would be like.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That's my dream fight. Those are my two favorite featherweights right now. that's my dream. Isn't it weird? My three favorite featherweights are officially Jose Aldo, and then Chris Gruetzemacher, and Enrique Barzola. One of these things is not like the others.
Oh. Gruetzemacher opened at plus 180, is sent out to plus 209. Skelly is at minus 260 and has basically stayed there. He's at minus 259, opened at minus 260. And, those odds could get wider to me, but I don't know that there's going to be much value in them. I'm
trying to find Skelly by
under
submission
a round
inside.
and a half is plus 120.
Yeah, even that's not certain, though. I mean, the thing, too, with Gruetzemacher is that man, I've just kind of realized that there may be an avenue to victory here for Gruetzemacher, because he's a pretty good defensive wrestler. He's like all MMA lab guys. He's pretty strong in the clinch and surprisingly difficult to take and then keep down. He scrambles well.
Is it that he's really surprisingly good at that, or is it that his level of competition in the past has been
great wrestlers, but he has responded well? It's like, I can tell that, for example, even before he fought a bunch of takedown artists, I could tell that Mike De La Torre knew how to stop a takedown. I think it's something that John Crouch has always done really well, is scrambling. Yeah. I mean, those guys understand their overhooks and underhooks, and they do not allow themselves to be controlled if they can help it. So there is that. And Chaz Skelly gasses. And Chris Gruetzemacher does not. I don't think he could possibly gas, because he's just like a 2 horsepower train that just keeps chugging along. So
I just think the athletic disparity is way too wide here. I
think so too. That's why I'm still picking Skelly, but there's something there. And if Gruetzemacher wins, I will be pleased.
Of course he will. If Gruetzemacher wins, it is hope for all of us who thought that we could do MMA someday. Like,
no, not all of us are as tough and as determined. No,
we're not. We're not. Awesome. But it's hope for like dudes with my body.
Yeah, whereas dudes like with my body can become Khalil Rountree. So
that's right. Or Roy Nelson. You're working.
Well, I'm already Roy Nelson without power and without the chin, so I need to change. I need to move forward, Zane. I need to be really strong guy who gets tired really fast. Right now, I just get tired really fast.
We'll get you there. We'll get you there.
Someday.
All right. That brings us to a heavyweight bout. Adam Milstead, Curtis Blades. And I like Adam Milstead. He's a cool dude. I don't know if you've interacted with him at all, but he's seems like a pretty cool dude. He's very self-critical, very like self-aware of his own fight game and like what needs to happen. I remember I wrote like a welcome to the UFC piece on it, and he shared it around, and he was like, oh man, no, you've got exactly like, these are my problems. These are what I'm working on, and this is what I'm investing in and all that. And I think those problems are too big to win against Curtis Blades. Milstead he's a good athlete. He's got power. He's got nice aggression, but he absolutely just squares up in front of people and throws hooks. And that is the basics of his game. And it sets him up perfectly to get hit with a power double leg because he is not balanced at all. Like, he's not throwing with any intention to do anything other than hurt you. He's got no defensive mindset at all. And that lack of defensive mindset is to the point that Chris De La Roca tuned him up in a lot of that fight.
Albeit a Chris De La Roca who had clearly been working on his boxing.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who's a lot less athletic and slower than you.
A lot less athletic
is dialing you up. I mean, because Curtis Blades, he's off working his striking at Elevation Fight Team, you know? Like, if any camp's going to get him better with his boxing, that's probably going to do it.
We already saw some results in the Cody East fight. He's definitely getting better.
And Blades otherwise is nothing else if not a power wrestling machine.
Mm-hmm.
And he's durable as shit. We know that from that Francis Ngannou fight, that he can get beat on without, like, you know, he wanted to keep going. His face was half broken, and he's just like, you know, cut me, Mick.
He would have been cut if he could. I remember in that fight, the referee asked him how many fingers he was holding up, and as sneakily as he could, Blades tried to feel his hand so that he could tell him because he couldn't see.
Yeah.
He wanted to keep going. That's a tough dude.
So I do not have faith that Milstead's square up and chuck hooks at Curtis Blades strategy is going to pay dividends for him here.
I have a little more, I think, a little more faith in Adam Milstead as a developing fighter. Something I think it's maybe it's because he kind of looks like him, and that would make this a totally baseless idea. But he also he something about him reminds me of the early UFC fights of Stipe Miocic, who most people did not expect to turn into that good of a heavyweight.
Yeah.
Most people certainly did not expect him to become the champion. And I remember, for example, his fight with Shane Del Rosario. He got hit and kicked a lot in that fight. It was really back and forth. He kind of had to wrestle Shane Del Rosario to beat him.
Mm-hmm.
Something about Milstead reminds me of that, where he's like a little stiff, but I think when I watch him, I look and I say to myself, this is good boxing for heavyweight. Like, this boxing works at heavyweight in a way that it wouldn't in other divisions.
Yeah.
Knowing how to place your shots, being accurate, hitting hard, taking a good shot. Those are all good things. Milstead does maybe have stamina issues, like many heavyweights do, although in fairness, the pace at which he fought Chris De La Rocha was pretty crazy. So
it's more pacing issues. He wants to square up and just chuck.
He doesn't have the discipline, you know. He can't resist a firefight if the opportunity is given to him. Curtis Blades, as you said, very durable and very mentally tough. Both the Ngannou fight and the Cody East fight, he got hurt badly. Cody East fight, he was given the opportunity to keep fighting, and he came back meaner than ever after getting dropped in the first round and hurt Cody East in the second round, and then took him down and finished him. So Curtis Blades definitely coming along. Power wrestling game. Also, the one thing I really liked from that Cody East fight, we have praised Curtis Blades as a prospect for his power wrestling, his double in particular, his explosive double.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a reason that is a kind of uncommon attack at heavyweight, because more mass to move with an explosive effort, and ending up underneath a sprawled heavyweight is a bad situation. It's not a good place to be. So the thing I really liked from Curtis Blades is that, yes, he hit his takedowns on Cody East, but he also took him down from the clinch several times and showed some nice upper body work and some nice foot sweeps, which are things that have always worked quite well among the big dudes. I mean, those are the kind of takedowns that heavyweight wrestlers use.
Yep.
There was always the kind of takedowns that Fyodor Emelianenko used for that exact reason too. They just worked better at heavyweight with these big opponents. So Blades is not just working on his striking, but he's also allowing his wrestling to blossom, which is great because that is his ace. That is the ace up his sleeve. So I'm going with Curtis Blades, 3rd round TKO. I do think Milstead hits hard enough, is accurate enough to get to Blades early. I'm counting kind of on Blades' durability and also on him being able to make his wrestling game work enough that he doesn't have to strike with Milstead if he doesn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Milstead will improve. Like I say, I think he's a smart guy that knows where the flaws in his game are. I just don't think that, like, that, seeing his fight with Chris De La Roca makes me think, even knowing it, he's still having trouble making the adjustments to improve it.
Sure. I mean, I imagine that was a very valuable fight for a guy who is aware of what he needs to work on. I mean, that gives you a lot of homework, a fight like that, and you still get to come away with a win. But it's only one fight ago. And Curtis Blades is improving pretty rapidly. And
it's really hard to make up things like a huge wrestling differential. Like, oh, I need to, be a way better wrestler to beat this guy. Like,
right. And especially at heavyweight, I think our wrestling game is better suited to a long, drawn-out fight in which both guys are getting tired because it's easier to lay on top of somebody than it is to keep swinging power punches at them and scramble up from their back.
Yep. So Curtis Blades opened at -185, now up to -234. Milstead opening at +145, now up to +191. I would say if Milstead keeps climbing in the odds, I would place a bet on him because it's heavyweight. And if guys start getting up above the 200 range, especially low-level heavyweights, that to me is getting a little silly. But it would have to be keep climbing. Like at this point, I think the odds are good. I think the odds are fair. ±200.
Sure. Yeah.
Other than that, under a round, you could still get +100 on some books. Under a round and a half, that might be the best.
That may be the way to go. Yeah, I think that might be the way to go.
Yeah. Under a round and a half, if you can still find that at positive odds, even at very close to even odds, that would probably be the best way to go.
Let's do some quick research. I always, before I do that, I usually like to find out that that's always a great bet if both guys have a tendency to get a lot of early knockouts. So Curtis Blades typically, Curtis Blades has a lot of 2nd round knockouts. He tends to need to wear you out a little bit before he beats your.
That's true. I've always thought of he's got that Brock Lesnar thing where he's not technical enough with any part of his striking game to just one punch drop anyone.
Yeah,
it's that he's so massive and physically strong that and all these chipping shots are pulping somebody.
Could we someday have Curtis Blades, Francis Ngannou 2 for the UFC heavyweight title?
Probably.
That's
honestly.
That's a distinct possibility. Both these guys are they're so far and away from the rest of the prospects, quote unquote prospects in the heavyweight division.
Yeah. So maybe not the over under on the heavyweight fight. In general, my rule is still don't bet on heavyweights, but I also do feel like the idea of Milstead getting a KO could be there, but it would have to be you'd have to be getting 300 odds for that to make sense. All right, that brings us to the main card now, and a women's strawweight bout: Jessica Andrade versus Angela Hill. And
I love this fight. I think it's awesome. I'm super excited to see Angela Hill back in the UFC. I think there is no better middle to the promotion that matched her poorly and then cut her for losing than to go and instantly win the Invictus strawweight title and then defend it. I mean, that's awesome. That's you shouldn't have cut me, and here I'm going to prove it. That was like Chris Camozzi breaking a dude's leg after getting cut from the UFC, and they're like, okay, well, maybe he's actually pretty good. Angela Hill, one of the best suited fighters to Eric Del Fiero's typical style. It seems to suit her really nicely because she's long-limbed. She likes to strike already with her longest attacks. And she was already pretty good at moving her feet and staying light. And now she has a more technical sort of array of angles and positions to use to enable that. The problem is for Angela Hill is that also I think it's maybe the crew style's maybe taken away some of her power, because I think she does hit pretty hard. She's actually got some kind of rare power for strawweight, and she does a lot of what Dominic has always done now, which is kind of pulling away just as her strike is about to connect, where she's already committing to her next angle before she's finished committing to the strike. And that means it's difficult to catch her out in a bad position, and she's unpredictable, but she's not really shocking people with her power like she probably could be. And that could be a problem. She is, however, surprisingly good everywhere that we didn't expect her to be. She's pretty hard to take down, and when she is taken down, she scrambles really well. She scrambles really well, though.
She scrambles well, and she's gotten a better submission game off her back. She's still not hard enough.
Yes, she's very good in the clinch. When she does stop a takedown, she's shockingly good in the clinch, kind of in a John Jones-esque way, which makes sense given her build. Good head control. She's the type of fighter who she's tall enough and strong enough that she can have double overhooks and stop you going for a double, rather than having to get underhooks and really drag you up that way. And she's surprisingly good on the ground. She has already in Invicta, I think twice, come close to submitting 2 submission specialists. So she's not lost there. And that could come in really handy against Jessica Andrade, who looks a little more fluid in top at strawweight, but has dove. How do you say has diven? How do you say someone has dived, I guess?
Has dived or has dove?
Has dived, I believe. Andrade, who has dived quite eagerly into 2 dangerous guards in the past, once into a choke from Raquel Pennington, and then, of course, famously into the triangle of Marion Renault, where she dove into it about 3 times in a row before being submitted. So if Andrade, who is still young, still pretty green, is over-aggressive on the ground, Hill might have an opportunity. On the feet, which is where most of this fight will probably play out, Jessica Andrade is 100% the female John Lineker. Her style is so reminiscent of John Lineker's, with all of its flaws and all of its boons. She pressures pretty methodically, doesn't actually go crazy with her volume when she's pressuring, when she's cutting off the cage, usually waits for her opponent to throw first. But once she starts throwing, she doesn't stop for a long time. It's like a 6-punch combination at least every single time. Mixes up to the body and the head, just like JL. Seems to take a pretty good shot. And yeah, that's, prefers this pocket range with her opponent backed up, and is quite frightening because she just kind of keeps after her opponent. She just kind of keeps after them, keeps throwing. When you can destroy Jessica Penne about twice as impressively as Ioane and Jacek did, like twice as easily, that says something about the sort of unstoppable nature of your striking style. I think that'll probably get to Angela Hill at some point. I don't think Angela's, it takes a lot of skill to consistently play Matador against a determined pressure fighter. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of experience. And I think Andrade may be a little farther along with the pressure. And I think it may be a little easier to put on pressure than it is to beat good pressure. So I think at some point, Angela Hill is going to end up clinched or caught against the fence. And the fact that she's still a little hittable is going to be a problem. The fact that she's not perfect with her takedown defense could be a problem. Andrade is very strong, very powerful. There is a window of opportunity, however, for Angela Hill. She has a bit of a submission game. If she can tire Andrade, because again, we don't really know how good Andrade's stamina is at strawweight after that big weight cut, then she'll have an opportunity. And if she can sit down on her punches and walk Andrade into some good shots, she could hurt her that way as well. I will say this, before you even get to your analysis or the odds, as a preview, the odds for this fight are bad. They are way, way too wide in favor of Jessica Andrade. And I think while I am picking her, Angela Hill is at least a very live dog.
All right. Given all that, I am also going to pick Jessica Andrade here. And the big reason I see is that I do like where Angela Hill's game is going.
Mm-hmm.
you know, like you say, she's adapting well to that. What's the what the hell's her camp? Damn it.
Who's that?
Your camp? What is it?
Angela Hill at Alliance.
Alliance, yeah, that Alliance MMA Dominic Cruz-esque style of movement and boxing, but it has taken the snap out of her punches, and the problem is that she's not bad at it, but she's not exceptional at it.
She's only just started learning it, so there are still definite hiccups.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that, you know, Livia Hanada Souza was able to take her to a split decision, even though Hanada Souza is, well, actually, she's pretty big. I was thinking of the other woman. I was thinking of Herrig Bercio. But there's the reason that Hanada Souza was able to take her to a split decision, and that Kylene Medeiros was able to get her down and, you know, to hit her on and off. It's that she's just not proficient in that style. She's not great at staying away, and she doesn't have the ace in the hole that Dominic Cruz has always had, which is that he's a fucking amazing wrestler.
True.
That's been the major backstop for Dominic Cruz's style, is that the big reason you could never take him down was not that he didn't walk himself right into takedowns. It was that it turned out on top of that, he also had amazing takedown defense.
Also, he was usually the one taking you down.
Yeah. But like, you know, his timing and jumping in style, like he would put himself right into a reactive double.
Yeah.
And you just stuff it, or you put him on his back for a second and he'd climb right back up immediately.
Yeah.
It's not something that Angela Hill has in her offense. So she has this what is becoming a very point kickboxing style and a grappling game off her back.
Yeah, she's become pretty consistent. She knows what she's doing, but she may also be sort of narrowing her it's a phrase I'm looking for here. She may be narrowing her window for error, where now the kind of fight she has to fight to win, it has to be more and more perfect the less capable she is of hurting people. And
Andrade, like, she's gotten, you know, Hill. I liked Hill's analysis of her own thoughts on the fight when she did a recent interview on Bloody Elbow, where she talked about how Andrade is kind of a tank, in that not just physically a tank, but also that she only moves forward and backwards and never side to side.
Takes a really long time to turn that turret.
Exactly, which is fair. Like, Andrade is really just gonna blitz straight at you and then work straight back. But her blitzes come at a lot. Like, she works her blitzes creatively. Like, that's where the creativity comes in. It's like she may be coming, and it's like Lineker in the same way. It's like he may be coming straight fucking at you, but you don't know if he's going to drill you to the body or to the head, or where those punches are going to come.
Wide shots that are difficult to circumnavigate. The thing is that's why I mentioned that Andrade is pretty methodical when she's pressuring, because like Lineker, it's straightforward when she throws, but she's got a couple of little details to make it work better, just like John, which is that she throws a lot of hooks and a lot of them to the body, which are hard to avoid. Even if you block them, you're going to feel the force and get held in place. And she tends to wait to throw until you throw, so that when she's waiting for opportunity and pushing you back just with her presence, she is cutting off the cage. It's only when she starts to attack that it's like a straight line. Yeah.
And so it's, you know, Hill is going to have to play a very perfect escape game standing, where she is slipping really well thrown combinations. A lot of the fighters she's fought recently too are not great strikers for Angela Hill. So, you know, we don't even know necessarily whether, you know, beating Livia Hanada Souza and Kaylee Medeiros and Alita Gray. Stephanie Egging's not a bad striker, but not a great one. But like that doesn't even necessarily say how well her footwork and head movement are adjusted. So I got to pick Andrade here. I do not think that Andrade, a lot of people I'm seeing out of them is like, oh, well, and Andrade is like a great grappler. She's not. She's a bully. And
Joanne Calderwood unfortunately does not have great guard retention, and that was her big issue in that fight. I have a feeling Andrade is still capable of being caught out on the ground.
I think that Andrade is still, in fact, just not a great grappler. She's powerful.
She is, however, very, very strong in this division because the high crotch lifts that she was hitting Joanne Calderwood with to get her to the ground, not like picture perfect wrestling, but very impressive as far as strength is concerned. She picked her up.
And that's kind of thing too that I am sure will get Angela Hill down, because Angela Hill still does not default to sprawl and underhooks when she feels a takedown coming.
Yep.
She defaults to, I'm going to try and throw a knee. I see a takedown coming and I'll try a jump knee, or I will try and just get over hooks and hold on and try and back myself into the cage. And that's not good. It's just not good standard practice. So
right.
I'm going Andrade here. The odds, yes, are absurd. Jessica Andrade opened at minus 245 and has climbed to minus 491. And Angela Hill opened at plus 175 and has climbed to plus 371. I would say Angela Hill is worth an underdog bet just by being scrappy and in the fight.
She could catch Andrade in a submission. She could outstrike her and win a decision. Like, there are opportunities for Angela Hill. She is a good put together fighter.
Yeah. So I definitely just a straight bet on Angela Hill, even though we're both picking Andrade and think that she has the most avenues to victory.
Just a small one, but I mean, she's got to be worth it at those odds. Like, those odds make no sense. There's
Andrade
no reason...
is the biggest favorite on a card where Chaz Skelly is fighting Chris Gruetzemacher. And
right. I mean, Andrade
where OSP is fighting Volkan Oezdemir.
Well, I mean, Andrade was like, she's walking into submissions and stuff just 2 fights ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that she was a decidedly mid-tier bantamweight. I think people are getting a little too excited about her strawweight career just yet. We haven't, there's still too many question marks about Jessica Andrade, and we know too many good things about Angela Hill to just confidently dismiss her out of hand.
Yeah. And that's not saying, put $500 on Angela Hill as an underdog.
No, please don't. Please don't do that. She'll probably lose the fight, but she'll definitely have opportunities to be competitive and possibly to win.
She could win. This is much more should be a plus minus 200 to 300 range fight.
Agreed.
That brings us to Anthony Hamilton versus Marcel Fortuna.
Is this the one that made you really psyched for this card, Zane?
Yeah.
This is the one this is your main event. This is
my main event. This is where it all happens. You know what? I think finally, I'm going to pick an Anthony Hamilton fight correctly. In that I am reasonably certain that Anthony Hamilton will beat Marcel Fortuna. Fortuna is I don't know why the UFC picked him up. They picked him up for a competitive fight at light heavyweight on a season of light heavyweights in which they kept almost no one. Almost no one stayed at light heavyweight, and the guy that beat him has already been cut. Fortuna is a big, powerful BJJ grappler who does not have a great BJJ game for MMA. And is more of a power wrestler in MMA who gets tired really fast. Fortuna's fights are marked by him getting a quick power double early in a fight and then sliding off somebody when he gets over aggressive, going for a complex submission, and then gassing out horribly and just having to strongman his way through the rest of the fight. And I don't think that that's going to survive against a true heavyweight in Anthony Hamilton. Fortuna is, I don't even know how tall Fortuna is, but he was not a massive light heavyweight in terms of height. He's kind of, he's kind of a brick shithouse, but he's only 6'1". He's not, Anthony Hamilton is 6'5" and right up near the 265 limit. and
a pretty thick 260. Yeah, he's Anthony. I mean, please do not let Francis Ngannou effortlessly Kimura-ing Anthony Hamilton convince you that Anthony Hamilton is not freakishly strong. It is merely that Francis Ngannou too is freakishly strong and freakishly skilled. So
yeah, everyone who has beat Anthony Hamilton is his size or bigger, and or way more skilled than him.
Yeah, and he has actually beaten some decent fighters who just happen to be smaller than him. It's a big deal.
Way more like Anthony Hamilton against Damian Grabowski, except without the experience that Grabowski had and the proven track record of winning fights.
Yeah.
So I am picking Anthony Hamilton here 100%, and probably by KO in the first or second round.
Same. Yeah. And the thing is too, Fortuna, you want to say about I don't know why the phrase Fortuna just made me laugh. It made me think it was two different words. The thing about Fortuna is that you want to be able to say, well, he's a guy that if he gets you to the ground, he's going to finish you. But that's not necessarily been the case in his MMA career.
No.
You know, he's a somewhat decorated jiu-jitsu player, comes from a good lineage, but he's not always been amazing. I think he maybe gets too anxious about his grappling in MMA fights. I recall his fight with who did he fight on The Ultimate Fighter?
Corey Hendricks.
Corey Hendricks, right. And he got Corey Hendricks' back, and at one point he just totally didn't put his hooks in. He went so crazy going for the choke, he just lost the position almost instantly. He forgot that Corey Hendricks could still scramble because he's like, I'm a grappler. This is my chance. You know, I finally have my opportunity. My leg's busted up. I've been hit hard. I'm on my back, but here's my opportunity. And he got too excited and lost it and ended up losing the fight. And even if that isn't a problem, I don't think you want to tangle with Anthony Hamilton on the ground if you're smaller than him. In fact, the one thing that he consistently does well is ground and pound. When he's on top of you, he hits super, super hard. And he is very strong and also just very heavy. Like, it's just hard to move him if you're smaller than him. So, yeah, Marcel Fortuna doesn't really have a clear avenue to victory here for me, whereas Anthony Hamilton, who is totally Anthony Hamilton is a perfect fighter for matchmakers because he's not artistic with his fighting. He's not really that creative. He doesn't surprise you or his opponents ever, but he is consistently, he's a benchmark. You know what I mean? He's very strong. He hits hard and he goes after his man. So if you are not good enough to be in the top 10 of the heavyweight division, you probably don't beat Anthony Hamilton. And I don't think Marcel Fortuna has a top 10 career at heavyweight in his future. So Anthony Hamilton by TKO is my pick too.
Yeah, and I mean, even to what you're saying, like I've seen, Fortuna's regional fights where he's fighting, other competition, and he'll lose an arm bar, just like he'll be on somebody's back and transition for an arm bar and just slip right off, or he'll get to mount and he'll just start throwing like really Juliana Pena-esque over like arm punchy ground and pound from mount. It's like he's supposed to be this BJJ master where I expect Misha Serkinov style for you to just be like slithering all over this person until you break one of their limbs off. Especially too, because I'm pretty sure he represented Ralph Gracie, who was a pretty good jiu-jitsu to MMA transplant in his few MMA fights. Yeah. But Fortuna has not carried on that legacy particularly well. And he seems super muscle bound and seems like he gets really tired the moment he doesn't have success, which may also be part of his adrenaline dump problem. And I don't expect that to be better at heavyweight. Right. Yeah. He was smaller than Corey Hendricks. Hendricks is a pretty big light heavyweight, but still, like Anthony Hamilton's the top end of how big heavyweights get. Yeah. So, yet on this fight, Anthony Hamilton is opened at minus 265 and is now minus 189, and Fortuna opening at plus 185, now at plus 158. Now I say never bet on heavyweights, and I will continue to say never bet on heavyweights. Under a round and a half, though, is at plus 105 to It started at -130 and is now -104 for under a round and a half. I would take a very hard look at that maybe because
yeah, it's tough, man. I can see Fortuna maybe being crafty enough from his back to not just get outright finished instantly, and I think Hamilton will have to have him on his back to finish him.
Maybe. I just don't trust Fortuna at all. This to me is a big mismatch, only made reasonable by the fact that it's a heavyweight fight, and I do not like anyone to ever bet on heavyweight fights.
Yeah, but you can actually get Hamilton on quite a few books. You can get him, quite a few points below -200, which is not bad as a straight odd either.
It's not bad as a straight odd. It's just heavyweights.
Yeah. Well, one heavyweight.
Yeah, one heavyweight and one guy who is one light heavyweight who may
the only time you can really confidently pick a mid-tier heavyweight is when they're not fighting another heavyweight.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Marcel Fortuna, this is one of those times.
Yeah, it is. That brings us to Ovince St. Preux, OSP versus Volkan Oezdemir.
Now, I don't think Volkan Oezdemir is as terrible as you seem to say.
I don't think he's terrible. I think this is there's a reason that OSP is near the top 5 of the light heavyweight division.
Yeah, there's two things.
There's a difference there.
There's two things that give Oezdemir an opportunity here. One, he's really good at catching kicks. It's a thing he does really well, and he turns them into takedowns very regularly. In his kickboxing career and in his MMA career, he's always done that really nicely. And no matter how many kicks you try to catch, I don't think OSP is going to not throw that left kick at your ribs. Unless maybe you're Jon Jones, in which case I still think he threw it a few times. One of his favorite strikes. So he's going to throw it. Oezdemir will probably get OSP down at some point. He is otherwise not an amazing wrestler, but with those kicks, I think that's a big opportunity. And then Oezdemir, the one thing that he does pretty damn well is ground and pound. He is pretty scary when he gets on top of you, whether he's in your guard, half guard, or mount. Those are all positions from which he is very comfortable raining down punches. And he's got a little bit of that Fedor-style ground and pound in him where he's kind of slinging his shots and getting a lot of snap despite being grounded. You don't expect that, but he does it well. Problem is OSP is a crazy good athlete, as we know. Yes, he does tend to wear down later in the fight, but even then, he's not bad. He still was very competitive with Glover Teixeira well after it was obvious that he was growing tired. I think he also has become a little more measured since the Jon Jones fight, and we saw that in the Rafael Cavalcante fight, which also demonstrated his toughness because he badly hurt his leg or foot in that bout and very convincingly beat Feijão despite that. So there's a lot to like about OSP just as a reliable upper tier light heavyweight. He hits hard. He's got really good timing, even though he gets a little wild with his shots. I mean, that check left that he knocked out Shogun Rua was a thing of beauty, and he's done things like that in many of his fights. And really the only thing that he's consistently vulnerable to is somebody who has a good takedown and top control game. Both Glover Teixeira and Gegard Mousasi were able to beat him using that method. Other than that, though, kind of hard to do. And unfortunately for Volkan Oezdemir, he kickboxes quite a bit. He's had quite a few kickboxing bouts and some pretty respectable ones, and he's won a few of them, quite a few of them. But he's not a great kickboxer. It's strange that despite all this experience and despite being a black Zillion, who I assume has trained quite a bit with Henry Hooft, he's still not a very good kickboxer. I think he's kind of foot slow.
He's a surprisingly good boxer. His boxing technique is good, but he's incredibly foot slow. And
he's an okay combination puncher once he's in the pocket.
Yeah.
When you make him have to come after you, the power goes out of his punch. He just squares up and kind of loses it.
Yeah.
And he's okay in the clinch. He's all right, but only with quick one-off knees and stuff like that.
He's a Fabio Maldonado style boxer.
Sure, yeah. So I think, his jab's not quite. Let's give Maldonado his respect. Maldonado's jab is actually very good.
He can't throw a quadruple jab, but he He's Maldonado without the jab.
Sure. So, but plus a ground game, plus a limited ground game, but a ground game nonetheless. Yeah, I just think Oezdemir is going to have too much time being caught on the feet, because even when he does get St. Preux down, St. Preux is so strong and a pretty good natural scrambler that you're not going to have an easy time holding. I mean, Glover Teixeira is a better wrestler than Oezdemir. Glover Teixeira had a lot of trouble holding St. Preux down. St. Preux literally just bench pressed Glover Teixeira off of him several times in that fight. So yeah, I think St. Preux is going to land big shots on the feet and beat Oezdemir, despite having those few openings for his opponent.
Yeah, a couple other things in this for me. Oezdemir is kind of he's one of those fighters who's got like a really good offensive game that is best suited to fighting people who are incredibly limited. Like, his game doesn't fit together that well. It's not like, oh, my striking flows really naturally into my wrestling, which flows really naturally into my grappling and all that. It's sort of like, if you can't wrestle, I'm a pretty good wrestler. If you can't, work off your back at all, I've got a pretty good ground and pound. If you can't strike, I'm a pretty good striker. But there's also a reason that Kelly Anderson just wrecked his world in Bellator. There's not a lot of flow and there's not a lot of defense in his game. He reminds me a bit of who's that other Black Zillions Dutch? He was Dutch and from Black Zillions, white guy, was in the UFC for a minute, has had like a really long Stefan Struve style career. Came out of World Series of Fighting.
I'll look into it.
Okay, you look into it. But he reminds me of that a lot. And yeah, I don't necessarily trust that he's going to get OSP down. I think that OSP, even if Oezdemir is looking to catch kicks, OSP may be just too fast for him to easily catch kicks. OSP's kicking game comes with a lot of power and speed behind it. And he's not a very big light heavyweight either. At 6'1",
was it Hans Stringer?
Hans Stringer, that's the guy.
Not a super flattering comparison. I felt a little bad for Oezdemir when you said that, because Hans Stringer burned out of the UFC and with the quickness.
Yeah, I just have a feeling that kind of is going to be Oezdemir's trajectory.
Do you think being Oezdemir, Oezdemir must feel embarrassed that he's in the same division as Anthony Johnson, and his striking looks. I mean, the same camp, more kickboxing experience, and yet Anthony Johnson is in a competitive title match while Oezdemir is still struggling to make his boxing game work. Yeah,
I mean, this is a guy who just got taken to a tough 15-minute decision with now 4-1 Alekhan Vakaev, who is stretched out and Russian, and that's about it. And it just, Oezdemir is not, I don't trust any part of his game, basically. He doesn't have any wins that you can bank on or any consistent kind of success. He's a little undersized, even if he's fought, at heavyweight at times. Like that last fight was at heavyweight, and he looked a little doughy there. And he's a good athlete. I think he's a very good athlete, but it just feels too much of his game is pieced together out of pieces that aren't going to translate that well to the UFC. And throwing him right at OSP, I think, is just a way to get OSP a win.
They're clearly not interested in protecting Volkan Oezdemir. We'll say that much.
It's just like, we needed somebody to fight OSP. You were around. You said yes. Okay.
And then after that, he can fight Daniel Jolly or someone else that they've also just fed to the wolves.
Yeah.
They just take these two shredded pieces of meat and just smash them together after they're done taking chunks out of them.
And that's why I think it's absurd that Oezdemir is a lesser underdog than Angela Hill.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
That's the thing to me. Oezdemir is opened at plus 235, now to plus 261. OSP opened at minus 315, now at minus 331. I think those odds are about right. It's light heavyweight. There's always a chance something goes wrong. OSP did just get knocked the fuck out by Jimmy Manuwa. So, there's always room. OSP is still going to be a bit sloppy, bit weird in his game. He's never going to have a really tight technical game anywhere. So he's always going to be playing with fire based around his athletic gifts. And when those start to fade, he could hit a real wall. But I don't think that that's this fight. I don't know that there's anything else to bet on it that I would really trust. Over and under 1.5 rounds are both running at favorite odds.
Yeah.
So that brings us to Abel Trujillo versus James Vick. I am probably picking James Vick in this fight. And I'm doing so because I think that Abel Trujillo is a real victim of Henry Hooft's cornering style.
He's also just the prototypical. He's like the worst thing about being a black Zillion. Like he seems kind of mean. He can't control his temper. He has criminal issues in the past. Like he is in every way the essence of Henry Hooft's in the corner.
The thing to me is too that I had that phrase, the idea of like a fighter is a power monster, like Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who is like my ideal of this.
Yeah.
Where everything he does is just brutally powerful. And then if his confidence goes, his whole game falls apart.
Yeah.
Abel Trujillo is another fighter who typified that. The thing is, I think he has stopped starting confidently. I don't think the confidence is there at the beginning of his game anymore.
And he's a glass cannon, and now he knows it.
Yeah, I think and I think that's what my feeling about like being the hoof corner problem is that has changed how he fights. Like, there's no confidence coming from his corner.
Yeah,
and that has wrecked his ability to even enter the cage with confidence.
Maybe, yeah.
Because his recent fights, even the ones he's won against Jordan Rinaldi and Tony Sims, those have been ugly, ugly fights. Like, he has had huge athletic advantages over Sims and Rinaldi. Sims, I think, made him gun shy immediately by being a far better boxer than Trujillo. And then Rinaldi, like, that was just an ugly, tentative decision from Trujillo. And Vick may encounter the same problem after getting knocked out by Dariush, because Vick has been also fighting with this false sense of confidence that he can just wreck anyone that gets put in front of him, and that finally got showed to him. But I think he's probably still going to fight with more confidence than Trujillo. And I think that Trujillo is going to be, Trujillo hits harder, is a better wrestler, but he's not a better he doesn't have a great control top game. He's not a bad grappler, but I think Vick is a better grappler and can do more with Trujillo if Trujillo's on top of him. And I think that Trujillo, like, he's, even when he's throwing with power these days, he's like putting his head down and just winging a shot in there and then trying to clinch up, diving on takedowns from way too far out.
It kind of seems like you think James Vick will be a super cut rate Tony Ferguson for, kind of keep Trujillo at range and then outwork him on the ground.
Pretty much. I think Vick is going to be confident enough to throw his strikes and potentially hurt Trujillo. And I don't trust Trujillo to stick to a power striking game that could knock Vick out. And if he doesn't knock Vick out, I don't trust him to out grapple him. So I'm picking James Vick here.
Well, I'm a slave to continuity, and I already picked Abel Trujillo in my Sherdog preview. It's already been submitted, so I'm going to stick with it. But you are making me doubt myself now. There's a couple things that make me worry here. One, to add to your argument, I was pretty sure Abel Trujillo was a short notice replacement here, but he was actually already in training for a fight with Evan Dunham, I think.
Vick and Trujillo, both their opponents pulled out, and so the UFC was just like, hey, we got two lightweights who are training for this card. Let's put them together.
Right. So they should both be in as good a condition as is required. They should both be fine, which is good for Trujillo because Trujillo on short notice is probably a lot more limited than Trujillo with a complete gas tank, because he's a guy who throws so much power and tends to kind of tire himself out as it is. So that's a bit of a note for Abel Trujillo. The other thing is James Vick was just on the receiving end of one of the worst knockouts I've ever seen. Beneil Dariush, I was concerned for James Vick when Beneil Dariush knocked him out. It was a thunderous knockout, and he was out cold for quite a little while. And really looked a wreck in that entire fight, just getting pieced up by Beneil Dariush. And I don't know how he comes back from that. If we're talking about confidence, and even if we're talking about physical ability to withstand punishment, I'm not sure. Fortunately for Vick, it was a while ago. It was back in May of 2016. So he should have had enough time to physically recover. But who knows how he's feeling after the first loss of his career, and what a bad way to experience your first loss. You know what I mean? To kind of think, to go through a lot of tough fights, be knocked down and come back and you're like, all right, you know what? I'm actually pretty tough. I can do this. And then to just be completely destroyed with strikes, it might shake you a little bit.
He did get knocked cold by Michael Chiesa in the Tough House.
Oh, there we go. That's true. That's true. Abel Trujillo hits hard. The fact that he doesn't have many knockouts in his record is not because he's not a huge puncher, but because he totally loses his cool the moment somebody touches his chin. And that definitely could allow Vick to outbox him. Vick is also extremely hittable. He has all the worst problems that tall fighters have. His chin is just like, it's up on a pedestal, just waiting to be snatched by any fighter with an overhand. And Abel Trujillo has that overhand. And my pick is basically based on Vick needing to adjust and needing to survive before he can start getting his game to work, which is typically the case when he fights a pretty good fighter. And I think that'll be the case here. And I'm not certain after that last fight that he will be able to survive the first 2 or 3 minutes of Abel Trujillo. But it's James Vick, man. And he's tough, he's crafty, and he is dangerous just about everywhere. So he really could win. I think you actually may be right, but I will maintain my Trujillo pick.
Yeah, the big concern for me is that I think that Trujillo doesn't come out throwing that overhand. I think he comes out not even throwing with power. He comes out looking to wrestle and just take Vick down and try and get the fight to the ground as quick as possible because he's no longer confident that he can just stand and bang it out with somebody. And that's my big concern.
Yeah, you may be onto something there. Do you think? I mean, Trujillo's had his ups and downs. I just think the idea that it seems plausible to me that Henry Hooft in the corner alone has crushed his will. That seems plausible because Henry Hooft is just so abusive in the corner. He does not build his fighters up at all.
No. I think it works fine for guys who have had a bunch of athletic success in their past and were have always been top dog. Then having somebody abusive in your corner may really spur you on and be like, no, I know I'm a winner. I know I'm great. And I got to prove this man wrong. But if you're just a guy who, has done various athletic things and kind of muddled along and been okay, that could just be crushing.
Yeah, context matters, right? If you were to go into your math class in high school and there was just a drill sergeant teaching the class just calling you a piece of shit, then you probably wouldn't learn math that well.
Yeah, but if you were maybe already a star math student, I actually had a teacher like that.
If you're ex-military and you come to college and your math teacher is also ex-military, you might thrive. You might do really well.
I can really relate to this though because I was really good at math in middle school. And it ended up being, I'm still pretty good at math, but I was really good at math in middle school to the point that my teacher was like letting me write the tests for him and all that for my classes. And he'd just give me extra credit. And so they put me in advanced math in an AP class where the teacher was absolutely like, I am teaching to the A students only. I do not give a shit about the rest of you at all. And I flunked out of that class absolutely in a hurry. But the people who were already really good at math and really brilliant people, like who loved math, because that's the thing, I didn't love math. Being good at it and loving it are two different things. The people who really loved it, they excelled in that, and they thought it was just great because they were challenged constantly. But I think it's, it's a thing that it works for the right people.
Depends on the mindset. You could see that. You could see it working for a guy like Carlos Condit or a guy like Daniel Cormier, like those guys. Maybe
or Rashad Evans. Like I can see easily. Rashad's had like a lot of wrestling success. He comes in there and he's like, I know I'm great. I don't have to worry.
Get him fired up. If your coach, those are the kind of guys who thrive when their coach is challenging them to do better.
Exactly.
But when you're not confident, being challenged to do better really makes you feel like you are bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's what's going on here. Odds on that fight, Trujillo is opened at -120, now at -110. Vick opened at -120, now at -112. So this is a dead even fight in the odds. I'm okay with that, honestly. I would not bet heavily either way. And, maybe the under 1.5 is +140, over -160 range.
I think under 1.5 may be worth a look here. What are the odds?
Odds are +140.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
That is not bad.
That might be the way to go because Trujillo and Vick both can be very good early finishers.
They can both be finished early, and they are both good early finishers. So I'd say there's quite a setup here for a quick finish.
And that brings us to our co-main event now: Alexa Grasso versus Felice Herrig.
Is this my go?
Yeah.
As you said at the top of the show, I think Alexa Grasso is being matched very well, which is to say that I do not think this is an easy fight, but I think it's a fight that she will most likely win. And that's precisely the kind of matches you need for a fighter. I think, by the way, we are starting to understand, the two of us together through this show, what the UFC's mindset is towards prospects. Sometimes I don't think they really just don't care about developing their prospects. They're like, well, they sometimes with guys like Aljamain Sterling, they have a bit of a shit or get off the pot mindset. People like Alexa Grasso, who is exciting, attractive, Mexican, three things that the UFC would love to sell. They're taking good care of her and building her up, not just letting her win, but building her up. Felice Herrig is an experienced opponent. She is well-rounded. She's a solid kickboxer. She's good in the clinch, which could be a really good thing for her in this fight. She's a good submission grappler. She's also been wrestling with some mental issues lately. She's talked about this quite a bit, that she thinks will help her not fade so badly after the first round, because historically Felice Herrig has been really bad at winning decisions. Every single one of her losses is a decision loss, and I think 2 of the decisions she's won have been close splits.
It should be also noted that almost every one of her wins is a decision as well. Like she gets some submissions in there, but
but they're frequently not convincing, and they're usually against a lesser tier, is my point.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. She's got a few submissions. Herrig tends to fade as the fight goes on. She, I don't know, kind of loses confidence once she starts to get beat, which isn't a great trait to have if you're supposed to be the crafty veteran in a certain matchup. But she's strong in the clinch. She's dynamic on the ground. And I think, too, if she comes into this and she is confident, she could score a lot of kicks on Alexa Grasso. Felice Herrig's a decent sort of Dutch-style kickboxer. She doesn't tend to rely on it a lot, but Alexa Grasso is quite vulnerable to kicks. It's the kind of strike that she eats the most often. And she's also quite vulnerable to consistent pressure, because past fighters, even if they have to walk through a hailstorm of jabs to do it, have kind of easily gotten her back to the fence, from which, like Anthony Pettis, she kind of tries to trade and scare the other person off rather than moving. Though I will say her footwork is already better and more consistent than Anthony Pettis ever has been. So Alexa Grasso, she should basically pick Felice Herrig apart while also having to fight her off and adapt a little bit to keep Herrig from closing her down, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one thing I will also say in Felice Herrig's favor is that she's a lot better wrestler than she gets credit for too.
True. And again, so is Grasso.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, Felice Herrig is it's unfortunate kind of for her, because both being an early entry into the MMA field, or not early, but having kind of come into women's MMA as women's MMA was getting more popular. You know, in the late 2010, in the late 2000s rather, starting her career in 2009, she became a face pretty early on that people were familiar with in women's MMA. So there's a lot of people who are quick to kind of dismiss her, both because they've seen a lot of her and think that she's been around a lot longer than she has. Like, she's in the prime of her career right now. She has just, like, hit her stride finally. And people are like, oh, well, Felice Herrig, this old, long-time vet. And it's like, she should be in Chris Weidman territory if you're talking fighter development. And then the other thing is that a lot of people don't like her personality. A lot. And it tends to overshadow the fact that she's a pretty good, well-rounded fighter who consistently shows up and fights hard. And people are like, oh, well, she's just pretty and she's not effective, or she's bad at everything and all that. It's just like, no, she's a really reasonably solidly talented fighter. She may not be a title contender, but she will show up and put on action fights every time out. And yeah, the big thing that's tipping me towards Grasso here really is all about athleticism and potential. The thing that's always held Felice Herrig back, I think, more than mindset and fading, is that she's just not an elite athlete. She never has packed a lot of power in her strikes, which means that her starting out as a volume kickboxer meant that she would often get caught up in a lot of scrappy bouts with people where she wasn't hurting them, and even if she was landing reasonably well, they weren't put in danger by her striking. So they could work through the offense she was offering and beat her. Otherwise, I feel like, she wrestles well, she grapples well, but she can just be outworked by better athletes. That's been a lot of the story. Obviously, in her Kylan Curran fight, she looked a lot better in that fight. So that gives me
so too.
And pause. She looks like she has, in fact, worked herself into even better shape. She looked more cut and a little bigger than she has before. And her striking looked more confident than it had. Her boxing, especially,
everything looked more confident. I mean, it didn't answer the questions about how well she does when she's being pushed, which has always been a problem. But she did look overall more confident. I mean, she pretty easily dispatched Kylan Curran.
Yeah, and part of that too is just, like I say, a lot of people underrate how well defined Herrig's grappling and wrestling is too. So the moment she got Curran down to the mat, she just subbed her without problem. Curran isn't Alexa Grasso, though. Curran is a fighter who is not as powerful as she is dynamic and fast. I think she kind of got a little more credit than she deserved for her athleticism. People are like, oh, she's so fast. And it's like, yeah, but there's not a lot coming behind that speed. Like, it's just kind of speed. And it's, there are different ways to be athletic. And I think that Grasso is a lot more powerful, as well as being dynamic and fast and big. So I expect her to be able to push Herrig and to create a lot of the same problems that Herrig has always had. But Herrig is a fighter that can catch her. Herrig may not hurt her immediately, but if Grasso opens up opportunities on the ground, or if Grasso backs herself into the cage over and over again, Herrig can be there to put volume on her and to stay in her face and make this a really tough bout. And I'm picking Grasso, but I love this fight because I think there's a serious chance for Herrig to be the crafty vet and to just be more polished and stay in her face and outwork her. So that said, the odds in this fight are a little wide. Felice Herrig is at plus 225, opened at plus 225, now at plus 236. Alexa Grasso opened at minus 305, now at minus 295. So not a lot of movement on the lines, but I think the lines are a little bit wide. I do not see a lot in Alexa Grasso's career that makes me feel like she absolutely should be picked dominantly in this fight, even when she has had wins over good competition, even when she's beat Mizuki Inoue and Heather Jo Clark and Jodie Esquibel. Those have all been decisions. They've all been, she's not out there just KOing fools and putting people away. She can still be put through a tough fight. And I think Herrig may be the best, most battle-tested of those. Inoue is obviously a good, talented fighter, but suffers from the same sort of, or suffers from being undersized and lacking power and having a disjointed game. And
I think as far as putting it to Alexa Grasso, it may be a little while till she finds someone who did it as effectively as Jodie Esquibel, whose record is not that glamorous, but I think is actually a really solid fighter.
Yeah.
Esquibel pushed her probably more than Herrig will, just constant pressure. But then again, Esquibel also got her face rearranged in the process. And you're right to say that Alexa Grasso, we should expect fewer knockout artists to strawweight, of course, but she hits pretty hard. And she's got a good snap and precision on her punches. So even when she's not putting her weight into them, they tend to hurt.
Yeah. So I'm expecting Grasso to win, to do more damage along the way. That's the big thing, I think, for me. But I think this will be a tough, fun fight. That brings us to our main event, Dennis Bermudez versus Chan Sung Jung. And I would be lying if I said I had a clear picture of exactly what this fight is going to look like, because I do not know how Chan Sung Jung is going to look. The last we saw of him was a tentative performance where Jose Aldo beat the brakes off of him.
It was tentative. He was surprisingly competitive with Jose, but got stopped in really gruesome fashion with a bad injury.
Yeah. I mean, he stayed tentative, and Jose Aldo is happy if you're tentative to just outwork you.
Sure. I don't know that he won any rounds, but he kind of made Aldo look a little bad. Aldo didn't. It wasn't a really impressive performance from Jose.
It wasn't a really competitive performance, but it was not a good performance from Korean Zombie. It was not the kind of performance that makes you think like, oh, that's a highlight for, like there's nothing other than it falls directly into my personal feeling of never get hyped on a fighter over how good they look in a loss.
Sure.
Because they still lost, and you don't know, like that's never a good measuring stick of like, oh, this person looked good losing this fight, so I think they'll look good winning this next one. It doesn't translate that well. Korean Zombie, he's an action he started his career as a brutal action kickboxer.
Mm-hmm.
And around the time he got knocked out by George Roop and got put through a tough fight by Leonard Garcia, he started to lose some of that edge to become a more measured fighter. I kind of feel like the Jose Aldo fight was the end result of a lot of measuring. Like by the Dustin Poirier fight, like he came out really a lot just looking to out-grapple Dustin Poirier and out-wrestle him and take him down and work him over. And he still had good moments of success on the feet, but he became a much more measured, patient fighter after getting head kick knocked out by George Roop.
For good reason, as most of us would.
As most of us would, and as he should. I mean, like, he was a much better fighter than George Roop. There's no real reason for him to get knocked out by George Roop other than his own recklessness.
And I would say the Dustin Poirier fight was probably the best he's looked in his career. I mean, it was a very good performance.
So, but where that leaves him after a couple of years on the sideline, I mean, that Jose Aldo fight was 2013. It has been, it will be 3.5 years since he last stepped in the cage. We don't know. We don't know if he's, over time, without fights to think about, has just gone back to his former reckless ways and has decided and it just remembers all the awesomeness of his early career and is I want to recapture that. We don't know if he's become more patient and more technical. We don't know if all of the edge has gone off of his game without constant sparring and good training partners. We don't know what he's been doing.
We don't know if any of these things could be true and still, I mean, he could have made great improvements and still be affected by ring rust.
Yeah.
Just not being as comfortable as he wants to be.
Overall, I am going to pick Dennis Bermudez, and part of it is the unknown of Chan Sung Jung. Part of it is also that I worry that a more measured Chan Sung Jung cannot out-wrestle and out-grapple Dennis Bermudez, who is a shockingly good wrestler and has a great ability to shut down grappling games.
It is the best aspect of his game, is his takedown game.
And he's really, really, really good at it.
Yeah.
Bermudez is still not a good striker and takes ridiculous chances and throws himself at people in ways that can get him hurt. But I don't trust Chan Sung Jung to just come out and knock him out, basically.
I think Dennis Bermudez is a good striker in a sense that he'd look really, really good on the pads. You know what I mean? Or in a partner drill. He clearly knows what he's doing. His technique is not bad. He's not sloppy. I think I've come to the conclusion that the real issue with Dennis Bermudez is that he is all or nothing when it comes to offense and defense. When he's attacking, there is no thought of defense in his mind, and when he's defending, he has trouble coming back. He's got a Dutch kickboxing style, and a lot of Dutch kickboxers tend to take turns with their attacks. I throw my combination, now I defend your combination. It's a lot of that, where it's one or the other. But unlike guys like Robin van Roosmalen or whatever, who know how to surprise you when you think it's your turn with a counter, Dennis doesn't really do that. You know what I mean? It's either all or nothing. So, and unfortunately for him, he doesn't have a great chin. So when he does get clipped, when he's going all offense, he gets hurt.
Yeah. He also has a chance. He also has a tendency to go in for big, exciting, flashy moves that leave him wide open to getting.
Yeah. He does recover extremely well from being hurt. Probably because he's a superb athlete.
Yeah.
His conditioning, he's actually, we should probably be more impressed by how athletic Dennis Bermudez is, because he's very strong. He seems to hit fairly hard. He throws a lot of volume. He prefers high amplitude, expensive energy-wise takedowns, and he still maintains his pace for 15 minutes. I mean, he's a very impressive athlete, and often while taking some pretty brutal punches from his opponent and recovering from them. So there's a lot to like about Dennis Bermudez. But that one central flaw, I think, has been the main thing that's kept him from pushing through, is that he just can't really control himself when he goes on the offense. He gets too excited, and he can't defend once he starts attacking. And because he's kind of a stocky little dude, he does a lot of that attacking from close distance where the other person can easily hit him. It's interesting what you say about Chan Sung Jung. I agree. Becoming more measured was clearly the thing he was going for. I'm not sure I totally agree that he was just a grappler by the time he fought Dustin Poirier.
Not just a grappler. I'm saying he came out and he looked for wrestling takedowns immediately. He came out of the gate looking to out wrestle somebody, which is a different thing than the Chan Sung Jung of old.
Yeah, I think he was pretty clearly, after the Roop knockout, he was looking to improve his wrestling game and his submission game, both of which are pretty good. Submission game more so than wrestling. Also, that instead of going wild on the feet, I think he was tending towards countering his opponents, keeping a little more distance, letting them lead, and then nailing them. And that's kind of the way his grappling works too. It's kind of a nice reactive grappling style where he's very good at reversals and sweeps, very good at catching you in submissions while you're trying to attack him. which could be really, really potent against Dennis Bermudez. Because if a lot of your style relies on the other guy forgetting to defend when he begins to attack, so that you can hit him while he's attacking, then that's kind of perfect for Chan Sung Jung.
It doesn't translate to Bermudez on the ground, though, where he really had no trouble out wrestling and grappling Hani Jason and Kawajiri.
Yeah, that's true. He doesn't have fantastic top control. Hani Jason got controlled a lot, but also Hani Jason was just kind of playing guard.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that Chan Sung Jung will just play a static guard in that way. But who knows? Yeah, and it's a 5-round fight too, which there's so many wrinkles that adds, that always introduces to the matchup. I think that Dennis Bermudez will at the very least have a strong first round, because 3.5 years, I don't care who you are, that has an effect on how comfortable.
Oh, we lost Connor briefly. And we are largely in agreement on Dennis Bermudez having a strong first round. Okay.
Hello, 3.5 years, I was saying. Doesn't matter who you are, that will have a strong effect on your comfort in the cage. We saw that very strikingly with Khabib Nurmagomedov against Daryl Horcher, where he looked kind of bad for a few minutes before he got his legs back. And I'm convinced that if Khabib Nurmagomedov had fought Tony Ferguson as he was supposed to, he probably would have lost. That adjustment period, Tony Ferguson's not a forgiving guy when you say you need a few minutes to get your game going. Nor is Dennis Bermudez, but he's also a lot less dangerous than Tony Ferguson. He's not actually a great finisher. No. I think he has pop, but I think it's because he gets stung and has to like pull back a lot that he doesn't tend to knock people out, and he tends to get submitted rather than submitting people. In fact, I think 3 or 4 of his career losses are submissions.
4 or 5. The other one is a knockout. If he's losing, he's likely going to lose big.
Yes.
When Dennis Bermudez loses, he does not lose by half measures, which is a perfect setup for Chan Sung Jung. Yeah.
Right. So it's such an interesting fight. I'm going to take a chance and say Chan Sung Jung. I like to think, my hope is that, because I know he had a lot of nagging injuries by the time of the Jose Aldo fight, and then that shoulder injury was just the icing on the cake, a very unpleasant cake. And having 3.5 years off in which to train and rest and not be in there taking shots in the cage, probably good for a fighter like Chan Sung Jung, whose early career was rife with a lot of wars, who took a lot of punishment both to his body and to his brain. So I'm hoping the time off will help him. And because Dennis Bermudez is not a great finisher, I think he will have enough margin for error to get through that first round. And after that, I think he will have opportunities constantly, really, because Bermudez loves to push the pace, to counter him either with his submission game or with his strikes. So I'm going to go with Chan Sung Jung. I'm going to say a 3rd round or 4th round submission.
All right. I like it. I'd love to see Korean Zombie win.
We would all like to see. I mean, both these guys, by the way, huge respect to both Dennis Bermudez. Dennis Bermudez does not give the appreciation he deserves because he's kind of the Ryan Bader of this division at this point, but he always has exciting fights.
He does.
And so does Korean Zombie. So this is a really, really, even if this whole card stinks and fails to deliver, it'll be easy to look forward to this fight and be excited.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I'm picking Bermudez. I think that his wrestling and top game are just too good. I think he can do too much there. And I don't trust Chan Sung Jung after 3.5 years off to be able to combat that right out of the gate. So the odds, Bermudez opening as the favorite at -175, now to -195. Jung opening at +135, now at +161. I would just stay away from this fight because Chan Sung Jung used to be a very good fighter. We have no idea where he is now, and that does not make for happy betting, just not knowing. When you have no clue how somebody's going to look in a fight, stay away from it.
Yeah.
And that's it, I think. Any final picks or thoughts before we close the show?
Nah.
All
we
right.
get the timestamps, so it's not worth it anymore for me to remember which bets I've advised.
Okay, well, on that note, you can find me on Twitter at These Anytime. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com and our various roles. You can find this video over on YouTube at MMANation.com, DOTCOM. You should subscribe to that channel if you're there. That way you get all the latest BE shows, interviews, analysis, all that good stuff. Give it a thumbs up on YouTube down there. Like it, share it around. All that stuff helps us a ton. And until next time, we will be back, not next week, I believe. Next week is an off week. But no, wait, we will be back next week. Never mind. We'll be back next week for UFC 208. And we will obviously have a Vivisection and Care Don't Care and If I Did It and Heavy Hands and all the good stuff that goes with that. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you then.